That's Mabel and Don't Call Me Up on BBC Somerset. It's 7:20. Good evening. Welcome to the show. And it's a Wednesday night, which means we're doing health and well-being, and we're going to relax ourselves now because we're talking yoga. Very pleased to say that David, the yoga soldier from Minehead, is in the studio with me. Hi, David. Thanks for coming in.
Hi there.
Now, tell me, we need to sort of decipher your name a bit here. The yoga soldier. Those two things don't instantly go together in my head. So you're a former soldier, former paratrooper.
Former paratrooper from One Para. Yeah.
Wow,
From
okay.
back in the early, 87 I joined until the early 90s. And used yoga because I'd been shown a bit of it when I used to do kickboxing before I joined. I used to do a lot of stretches. And my mum and aunt, who did yoga at the time, noticed that a lot of the stretches were kind of similar and said that, oh, you're quite good at that and you're actually better than us at the stretching. So it started off with the stretching thing, but my mum started giving me videotapes to do it too. And then the breathing part of it, which we call pranayama, which is breath control, that came into my life, which I then used on leave when I was in tour in Northern Ireland. I started using breath control and noticed that it actually calmed me down. And it kind of come from there.
Wow. So being in the army, being a paratrooper, led to you becoming a yoga teacher, which is great, isn't it? Okay, let's go back right to the beginning then. So where were you brought up?
Glasgow.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Mount Vernon. At the time, where I lived was in between a couple of estates that weren't too great. So you needed to be able to look after yourself. And I started doing kickboxing, bit of karate. Had several friends who were beaten up and thought I needed to be able to protect myself. And that's where the karate and the kickboxing side come in, about the stretching thing. And then I joined up in 87.
So it was straight after you finished school, was it?
Straight after school.
Right, yeah.
Straight in.
Why? What was it about the army?
When I was really young, my dad was a captain on super tankers, used to come home and leave, and our kind of father-son thing was watching A Bridge Too Far, which I don't know if you know the film, about Arnhem.
Yeah.
And I just become obsessed with wanting to be a paratrooper from a really young lad. And I went to the Army Careers Office when I was 15. They said, no, you're too young, come back next year. Went back the following year at 16. They said, no, still too young. And then went back the following year.
Were they hoping in that year that you might have,
Well, I think they were trying to get me to join a Scottish regiment, which it was parachute regiment for me or nothing. So I went back again when I was just before 17, and then I got accepted to go for obviously the recruit training, and then passed all that, and then went straight to Aldershot to start for getting a Red Berry P Company, which is your test of fitness, and then on to parachute training.
Wow, I bet that is tough. There's one thing joining the army, it's another thing, isn't it? Start to train to come out of a plane.
Now there have been several documentaries over the years about P Company, about the Red Berry becoming a paratrooper. It was very tough, but for me that was part of it. I just liked the toughness of it and the challenge more than anything. I really liked the challenge, which I'm still like now. I like to challenge myself. I think that sticks with you when you're like that.
Yeah, well, once you've been through what you've been through, I imagine that you have to push yourself quite hard to find a challenge.
Well, I think it was the fact I went straight to Northern Ireland. We went from basic training straight to what they called NITAT training, which was training for Northern Ireland, down at Hythe and Lydd. I hope I'm allowed to say that's where it is. And when we finished, we had a bit of leaving straight over to South Armagh. So it was pretty instant from training straight to the real thing.
Do you remember the first trip you did up and then jumping out of a plane?
I do. The first one was from a balloon.
From a hot air balloon?
A balloon. They used to put a balloon up to about 700-800 feet, and you had a basket hanging underneath the balloon, and 4 of us would go up at a time with a jump staff, and you basically jumped straight out the balloon. They opened the door up, and down you went. Stomach into your mouth.
The army doesn't tend to use balloons for much else these days. It's not true to what you'd been doing out, in a point of conflict. But I suppose as a first try, do you remember how you felt?
Terrified.
Right.
Yeah, terrified. You can imagine the G-force, can't you? You're going from a stationary position straight down, and the parachute doesn't deploy for about 3 seconds. So I think you hit about 120, 140 miles an hour before it does.
So from 0 to 120 in 3 seconds?
Something like that. Don't quote me on it, but yeah, a lot of G-force. You can imagine your organs and everything coming up.
You leave your stomach up at the balloon.
Yeah.
Right. Do you ever get used to jumping from
I
heights?
think you used to get on the ground. I mean, we used to jump from Hercules, C-130s, Lockheed Hercules. I think they still use a similar plane these days. It was out the side door. It wasn't like you dropped from something to nothing because you had the movement of the plane. So it was more like going out a kind of down a slide sort of thing. You still had the falling feeling, but it wasn't quite as, wow, straight into the stomach and the head. But you had the fear factor of jumping out the plane and getting caught up on the side of the plane if your chute didn't open properly and stuff. So
yeah. So you were in Northern Ireland. So this is the late 80s. You'd have been in Northern Ireland.
I went there. 1987 I joined. 88 I started in a place called Newton Hamilton, which was a small village in South Armagh. And then I went from there to a place called Besbrook Mill, which I think it was a converted cotton mill with British Army in South Armagh set up their main. That's kind of where they had their main depot, if you like, for all the other sort of smaller outposts. And I kind of went around. You probably heard of Crossmaglen. With Bobby Sands, the hunger striker, he's buried there. We would patrol Crossmaglen, we'd patrol a place called Cullyhanna. A lot of these places had a real massive proportion of, or percentage I should say, of Catholic. So you can imagine the attitude toward British soldiers. It really was quite tense. You could almost feel the tension in the air when we were there.
You were a teenager at this point.
I was.
Yeah. Did you feel scared? Because there's the part of teenagers that's kind of invincible, isn't it? They feel like...
I think... Well, our sergeant, I won't say his name because obviously his family and stuff, but we were there 2 weeks, I think it was, and our sergeant was blown up. We were told, you don't go through gates, you cross on the middle of a hedge down from a gate, but they'd obviously been watching us, and that's where the bomb was. He went over a hedge. We used to get our clothes ripped to shreds because we would cross in the most obscene places on the hope that it was safe, and that was the end of him. 2 weeks in, so it all became very real really quickly, and I don't know what happened, but I think it just made it not the norm, but you thought, this is real, this is what I trained for, this is what's going to happen, I'm here for my stint, I'm just going to get on with it now and wait till I can go home.
How long were you there for?
6 months each time. So I can't remember exactly how long each time was because we wouldn't get told when our R&R was, obviously for safety reasons. They wouldn't pull you in and out because obviously people might be listening. So I think each time I went was probably two 5-month stints. And then we got a 3-year residential at Belfast, which is why I bought myself out. So I did a thing called PVR, which means post-voluntary release. I was one of the first ones to try it with the CO. Luckily for me, I was one of the lucky ones that got out before we had a 3-year there as well on top.
Right. When you look back on it now, how do you feel, seeing your teenage years spent in conflict zones like that?
Well, I've got 2 little girls. One of them's coming up for 11. And I think, that I did that only in 6 years' time in her life now. So it does seem quite young, but you don't think that at the time.
You feel quite old at the time when you're 17, 18.
I think you do.
Yeah. Just a kid, really. Well, it's fascinating stuff. Not specifically what we're here to talk about, but it's an important part of your story, isn't it? So it was through that time with the army and the paratroopers that you got into yoga, that you found that you were doing the stretches and then the breathing.
I'd come home and leave, and as tape, I can say the guy's name. He was a guy called Alan Finger. A lot of my, I've got a group called TTC, which is where I did my teacher training, Glastonbury TTC group, so they'll probably be really happy giving them a shout out. And a great woman called Wendy Teasdale who taught us all to teach. And where am I going here? So, the yoga with the army thing just meant that I'd come home and I found a place that within my mind and my body I could use to relax. And this tape that my mum would give me, this Alan Finger tape, which was an old-fashioned videotape, had the yoga postures, but it also had a bit of breathing, not a massive amount, but some breathing techniques and stuff that really seemed to make a massive difference to my mindset. So I'd come home and leave, and the first chance I got, if I could get a clear space in our lounge with my brothers about, I'd do some yoga.
What did you tell your army colleagues you were doing yoga?
No,
kept it secret from them.
No.
So you were a little bit ashamed, or you didn't feel like it was the sort of thing you should be telling your
I don't know,
friends?
it's a bit like all sorts of things you didn't tell somebody you were upset. You wouldn't tell somebody you're bored about stuff. People, we talk about PTSD now, the post-traumatic stress disorder. I had people killed. I had 2 friends killed. Not once did we get offering counselling back then. It wasn't even spoken about that you needed counselling. I don't know if they thought it would make the gang soft. So there was nothing there for us. It was never even said, does anybody need some mental support? You just soldiered on.
Times have changed now, and there seems to be more understanding of it.
There is.
Okay, so you didn't mention the fact you were doing yoga because you thought people would have then looked at you in a different way.
I think they would have thought it was a bit strange, and a lot of people when they considered yoga back then, I think they kind of thought women wearing leotards and stretchy stuff, a bit like Mr. Motivator.
Not a great look for someone who's a teenager trying to prove himself in the army.
A paratrooper and a mankini, I don't know.
Okay, so you didn't mention it. What about your brothers? What did they think?
Oh, they were never interested. I've got a twin. He was into his DJing, and my older brother, well, I think he was just doing his own thing as well. So, yeah, I think they kind of looked at me as if I was a bit weird.